Okay, folks, this one we are super excited about. So why don't I welcome everybody and do a little intro for Kay, and then we will learn all about orchids from the amazing orchid lady. I'm Judy Clem with Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, and the Friends support the Oak Park Conservatory with a number of volunteer opportunities, special events, and education programming, along with fundraising to support the 95-year-old facility. It is part of the Friends mission that we want to help educate and inspire gardeners to become more confident in their endeavors. And following tonight's program, we'll have a new lecture series for you in the spring. It'll be our Learn and Grow program, and it'll be 3 weeks in person at the Oak Park Conservatory. Space will be limited. The programs will be amazing. And registration will open probably in about a week or two, I think into early March is when Learn and Grows. So we'll send an email out when those open up. So those are lead into our annual plant sale. Our Friends in Bloom membership drive is happening now. If you are interested in joining the Friends by March 28th, you will get access to 2 weeks of early shopping of our annual plant sale, and you'll also have a chance to win a $50 gift card to the annual plant sale. So we've got a little perk or incentive for you to join by March 28th. The plant sale itself opens on March 29th for 2 weeks to members only, and then it opens to the public after that. Also, as a member of the Friends, you may not realize this, and I'm just giving this as a reminder to anybody who is a member. You get reciprocal privileges at 380 gardens, arboretums, conservatories nationwide. And now that Garfield Park Conservatory is charging for admission, if you're a member of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, that admission fee is waived. So it's a great deal. It pays for itself. You also get in for free at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, and their orchid show is happening right now, and you can get discounted tickets with your Friends membership. So keep that in mind. And if you have any questions, let me know, and you can learn more on our website. Seed sale is happening at the conservatory. And then here's some key dates about our plant sale. So more information is available on our website. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest this evening. Dr. Kay Perry bought her first orchid at the Evanston Farmers Market while a graduate student at Northwestern University. Now, with over 1,000 orchids in her home greenhouse, she has been growing orchids for over 23 years. Dr. Perry is a member of the Illinois Orchid Society, the American Orchid Society, and she's also an associate judge with the American Orchid Society and has judged orchids internationally. She's also published articles in Orchids, the magazine of the American Orchid Society. So tonight, Kay and I talked about doing something a little bit different, and we are going to go for it. We're going to roll with it, and you're coming along. So Kay is going to do a live demo for us in her home garden, and she's also going to move the camera to show us the tabletop desk where she has some close-ups for us to look at. So I don't think you have any slides. Is that correct, Kay?
I didn't do any slides. So
okay.
When you had me, I guess about 2 years ago, give a talk, I did a PowerPoint and I wanted to do something different.
Okay. So friends, we are doing something different tonight. It will be a live in Kay's in her studio, her home garden. And we also want to try something with our Q&A. We certainly want you to ask questions in the chat, and Casey Nikoloff is my co-host tonight. So we do want to get to your questions, but if you happen to have an orchid that's sitting nearby your computer, Casey, can you hold up that orchid pot for us again? And she'll turn off her blur, but Casey's got an orchid, and if you happen to have an orchid nearby.
Oh, you might have to stop sharing your screen. I can't see Casey.
Oh yeah, sorry, 1 second. So there's Casey. So you guys should be able to see. So if you happen to have an orchid nearby, we will call on a few participants to hold your orchid up, and then Kay will take a close look. She'll ask you to move it in a couple of different directions, and then she'll give you some feedback afterwards. Okay, so that's what we will do with the orchid diagnosis experience later. Okay, so we'll call on a few people to try that. Okay, so Kay, are you ready to roll?
Yes, so
Okay.
let me set
gonna-
up to share my screen so it's big for everybody.
Yeah, I've got you pinned so we can see you.
Oh, it says only the host can share in this meeting.
Okay, do you need to share your screen? Hold on one second.
Well, I don't
One
have to
second.
share. I mean, as long as you guys can see me big.
Yes, we can see you.
All right, as long as everyone can see me big and I'm not like some small, tiny window. All right.
No, everybody, I can, there you are.
Hi.
We
So,
can
hi,
hear
everybody.
you and we can see you. Hi,
I'm
Kay.
in my sunroom in my house, and I thought I would start this evening sharing how I grow my 1,000 orchids that Judy just talked about. And so I have everybody on my phone. And so everybody's very small. Actually, you're non-existent because you're in a different window. But so if you, Judy or Casey will have to call out any questions that people might have because I can't see the chat at all.
Yeah,
But-
no, we'll let you know as it goes, but why don't you slowly move? So the camera's moving a little bit, but then she's gonna pause.
Yeah, so
we're
this
testing this out, guys.
This is my my sunroom. I have 18-foot glass ceilings. I live on the east side of Oak Park, over toward Austin. And I have all my orchids arranged in here with the lights on. I'm just trying to walk slowly. On 6 foot, those metal shelves right here. And you can see that I have some in bloom. And we're gonna get really bright because I've got those LED strip lights. There we go, turning away from it. So this actually is my normal potting area. It's kind of messy, but I have lots of different kinds of orchids in here. So this right here is a Cattleya hybrid. It's orange. This little one down here, this is a Dendrobium cuthbertsonii.
Can you linger on those for an extra minute so we can
Sure.
see them? Yeah, just pause for a second so we can take them in.
They're very tiny.
Cute. And can you go back to that orange one again so we can see it one more time?
Just trying to get it so you guys can see it without the big bright LEDs.
Yeah, wow.
All right, and then there are, this is another type of Dendrobium. Dendrobium is one of the most varied classes of species of orchids. This is Dendrobium kingianum here. This is another Dendrobium right here, because little clusters of flowers. It's in the nobly, it's a nobly hybrid. All right, I'm gonna turn back this way. So I have orchids all over. I have them on a step stool. I have more kingianum hybrids here. I have more, there's a Cattleya. See that? If I get a little closer. All right, this is another Cattleya. All right, I'm trying to back up without falling. All right, so I have them on these shelves. The windows are on the other side of the shelves, and that's where the light comes in. I have an eastern and southern exposure in this room. And then I have one wall of the room backed up against our house. And it's attached to what used to be my daughter's bedroom. And I'm very proud of this. I have a variegated Meyer lemon, one of those pink lemons. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a Meyer, it's a Eureka lemon. So it's not only variegated, but it has pink flesh. All right, I'm gonna turn very slowly. And just to show you how varied the dendrobiums are, this down here is also in a Nobile family. So we saw really small flowers, saw really big flowers. And if you go to the orchid show at the Chicago Botanic Garden, you'll see lots of Nobile type dendrobiums. And so then I'm just going to try to pan really slowly. The space is really small right here. I have, it's 6 feet deep and it's 18 feet wide, which is the width of my Oak Park house. And so it's really cramped in here to get 1,000 orchids. So you can see I have the really big ones up on the top shelves. And it comes around right here. So you too, if you're insane about orchids, can convince your spouse to let you put on a sunroom on your house in Oak Park. The building architectural people will totally let you do it. And then here, there's some more. So the big thing about orchids, and I'm going to tell you guys how to maintain this, is that they want a really humid environment to grow in. So in my grow space, I have these foggers going all the time, and I try to keep the humidity in this room above 50%. And I have radiator heat like just about everyone else in Oak Park, and that is very difficult in the winter. I don't have radiator heat here. I have baseboard electric heat in this room, which doesn't do a great job. And the heat actually went out in this room during Martin Luther King weekend when we were like below zero. And I actually had a bunch of orchids in here freeze. So as you can tell, I have some yellowing of leaves. They're not doing great. And what I do is on the side of the room, like here, you can, that's against the wall. This is shaded by the overhang of my roof. And so I have supplemental lighting on the one rack that I have against the wall here. And then everything else I grow using sunlight. So the racks out there get plenty of light. And I grow in a bunch of different mediums. So like the ones that you're seeing right here grow in what called mounts. They're mounted. So these orchids, I'm going to come close so you can see, they've been tied with like fishing line or string to like cork for the most part, but also there's some cedar shingles, there's some wood boards, and then they're growing along the wood. And this is how orchids want to grow in the wild. They want to grow and let their roots ramble everywhere, like all types of orchids. There's a few terrestrial type orchids, but most orchids are what we call epiphytes. They grow up in the canopy of the rainforest, and they're sitting on branches, and they are dangling their roots. So those white things back there are roots. They're dangling their roots everywhere. So I'm just showing you how the roots want to dangle. Now, I have a room to grow all my stuff in, but for most everybody, you guys don't have a room like this. And you probably don't want to be growing stuff in mounts like this because the way you water this is you basically have to soak the boards or, use a hose, which is what they do in Florida. And you don't want to get water all over your house. So for most people, you're going to want to grow your orchid in a pot. And so what I'm going to go through on how to care for an orchid that you would buy at the grocery store in your home is how to repot it, when you should repot it, how you should water it, and how you can get it to rebloom, which are the questions that I usually get the most from people is like, how can I repot this? And how can I get it to put out flowers again? So a lot of people go, to Home Depot or Lowe's or like Tony's, the grocery store, and you get an orchid and you bring it home and it comes in one of these little plastic inserts. So let me see if everyone can see that. Oh, all right. Comes in this plastic insert right here. And in this plastic insert, it's usually in a cache pot. And so, people don't necessarily want to keep them in the pots, but commercial growers put them in these pots because it lets them not have to water the orchids very often, right? So water costs money. And so it's less labor to water less often. So what they do is they take their orchid that you get at the grocery store and they take sphagnum moss, usually. I mean, you get a few growers who sell things in bark, but mostly it's sphagnum moss because that's the most economic. And they will press it in with the orchid roots really, really tight. And I just told you that orchid roots want to ramble. They want to crawl along the trees. And so that makes it really, really hard for the orchids to grow really well, right? And so often if you have something that's growing really well, what's going to happen is, let me show you another example. The orchid is going to not stay inside the pot. It is going to send its roots everywhere because inside the pot with the tight moss, the roots can't breathe. So when I say that they're epiphytes, the roots of an orchid do photosynthesis and they respirate, they exchange air. So they're not like a terrestrial set of roots with just, uptake like water from the soil. So if you treated them like a terrestrial and you kept them really like smothered inside the pot, then the roots die. So if you have enough humidity in your house, like usually above 50%, then the roots of your orchids will not stay inside their pot. Because of this, the pot right here is for you, right? So, you could grow this completely naked. There are people who grow these types of orchids not in a pot. They put them like on a board, just like I showed you with my mounted orchids, and they do just fine if they get watered enough. But it's hard to do that. I always like to tell people that in Florida, people will talk about how they'll take a staple gun or some string and they will just staple these to the barks of the trees down in Florida, and they do just fine. So you don't have to have them in a pot. They don't need to be in a pot. The pot is for you. All right, so what do you want to put in a pot if the pot is for you and it isn't for the plant? So I have here on this table 2 different types of mixes. So over right here, I have what is bark mixed with a little bit of sphagnum moss and perlite. The point of this mix is that it can make air pockets. So remember, epiphyte, so the roots need to be able to breathe. So the shape is irregular and it makes air pockets. It's not solid, right? This mix I got right here, I got from Hauserman's in Villa Park. They're an orchid nursery in our area. You can also, you can also buy those like commercial ones at Lowe's or Home Depot, and they'll have things like rock and charcoal and everything. And really, it can be anything. You could grow completely inorganic media. You could grow in like clay pellets. You could grow in lava rock. But it needs to have a way for the media to make air pockets for the roots of the orchid. And then we have right here what is basically 100% pure New Zealand sphagnum moss. And this holds a lot of water. And so what I like to tell people is that what you're going to put in the pot around the roots of your orchid depends on how often you want to water it. So if you like to water your orchid about once a week, you could do either of these. And this would be kind of like, 5 to 7 days you want to water it. And this would be like 7 to 10 days. And what you want to do is not do what the commercial growers do, which is that they take this moss and they just squeeze it really hard into the roots of the plant. What you're going to want to do is to put it lightly around so it can still breathe. If you have a problem, so like you'll see demos online of people where they talk about you pot the orchid and then you like squeeze and you crunch the media in. You don't want to do that because you want to leave room for the roots to breathe. The only reason to press the media in is to keep the orchid in the pot. Because remember, this is for you. This is not for the orchid. It's totally happy with its roots exposed everywhere. So picking the kind of media based on how you want to water is the first step, right? It can be either thing, but it depends on how you want to water. So you get your orchid from the grocery store and it comes in bloom. So this one right here actually has been in bloom. I think you can just barely see one flower. Like the flowers are fading. You can tell like most of it's fallen off, but I have one flower left. It's actually, these things can bloom 3 to 6 months. And there are people who will say that their orchids this type of moth orchid stays continuously in bloom for years. It just never stops. It always just keeps putting out one more flower. So when you get this orchid home and it's in bloom, don't immediately repot it. So you want to wait until it stops blooming. I am going to repot this one tonight, or repot one of them. But I'm going to go over this plant and tell you where all the different parts of like the plant are, like how they're storing water and like where they're going to put out like new blooms. So there's a main stem right here for the orchid. On this stem, we have what we call nodes. And let me lift up the camera so you guys can see the node. Okay, so this right there is a node. In this node is non-differentiated tissue. So this can become one of two things. It can become a new plant, or it can become like a stem coming out that can have flowers. Or it can be a flower. So it's actually one of three things. Or it can be a flower itself. So you can see here Trying to do this without with the lights, but then there's too much light. I apologize. Okay. So you can see here, right here, these are bloomed out nodes. This is where the flowers were. And on these orchids that you get from the grocery store with the bloomed out nodes, when they're done, you should not cut off the entire stem. So you can cut it all the way down at the base of the plant where my hand is right now, down at the bottom. But if you would like it to bloom out, like this stem right here, where it's branched and put out another one, so like the top is done, but you can get more flowers out of lower branches. You want it to branch and keep blooming for you. Then what you want to do, this is a little trick. You're going to find the first left. You're going to find the first unbloomed node. So I'm going to take this clip off because it's over here. So on this one, I can turn this plant enough. This is a bloom node right here. And you can see right down here, there's a little nub. This is an unbloomed node, or maybe this one's already differentiating and it's starting to come out. So if I wanted it to branch right here, you can see on this one, there's more where it's pushing out already. I could cut this right above the first unbloomed node. Like this. You want to cut it above, leave about a ½ inch to an inch. And that will encourage these unbloomed nodes to sprout and put out another branch. And I have orchids at my workplace where I've done that and they branched out and made a new one, like you can see here. And then I've cut the end off and then they branched out the first unbloomed one and they just keep branching. They branch 3 or 4 times now. What this does is it shortens the time it takes for the plant to put out another flower spike if you don't cut it all the way down and you just cut it right above the first unbloomed node. And you can tell if that something's going to keep blooming off the end. So this one's not going to do it. So like this one isn't going to do it because the end is now brown. But if you have a green end, then it will keep doing it. This one's probably not. It's probably done. So if you have gone ahead and already cut it all the way back down to the base right here, then how do you get it to bloom again? So there's a trick to getting these to bloom again. This type of orchid needs to cool down in order to bloom. So it needs to be cooler at night by 10 degrees than during the daytime. And so what I usually recommend for everybody in order to get that is that you take the orchid and you put it like on your windowsill. You know, most of us have nice old houses in Oak Park and they're a little drafty and it's nice and cool. And so the sun will come in during the day and they'll get warm. And then at night, it will cool down and that will give you your 10-degree differential between daytime and nighttime. And if you do that to the orchids for about a month, then it will send out a new flower spike somewhere from the base here. But that flower spike has to grow all the way up to the end before it starts putting out flower buds. And so that's why if you just cut it like by the nodes, rather than cutting it all the way down, you can have flowers sooner because you don't have to cool the plant down to get it to put out more flowers. So these plants are in the, they fix carbon in the same way that cacti do. And so because of that, it's really hard to look at a plant based on the leaves and say, is it alive or dead? Because it's actually storing water inside. So I'm going to show you this right here, which has now finished dying all the way. This is a dead orchid. So it's rotted right here at the base and it's come off. But you can see like this leaf still looks pretty firm. You can't really tell that if it wasn't for this yellow part and the fact that it's not attached to a plant anymore, that it's actually a dead leaf. On an orchid, this type of orchid, you can see that even though this is dead and it has no leaves, it still has some good roots. But what kills it is, see if I can get it out so I can show everybody. Whoa, no. So you can see this one is very firmly packed in here. So when I get down to what is the stem of the plant, I already knew what I would find because when I checked this out for this Zoom, I could feel that the stem was wobbly. And that meant that it was soft and rotten. I'm going to try to expose it so you guys can see how soft and rotten it is. And you can see that this moss, right? Like this moss right here, it's like packed really tight. When sphagnum moss gets really, really dry, it doesn't absorb water. So what commercial growers do is they water it really, really well, and then they don't water these plants for like 2 or 3 weeks. There's just a lot less labor. So let me see. So you can see the roots here still look, they're really good, but this is a dead plant. Good live roots when they're wet are green. They're firm and plump. Bad roots are thin and papery and flat. So here's the stem. So see how the stem is black? Let me make sure everyone can see that. See how this stem is black? This stem is rotted out, so this is where the stem would have come out. These Phalaenopsis, which is the kind of orchids that you get at the grocery store, are monopodal. They grow up on a single main stalk, straight up. And if this basically the crown, this middle part is dead, then the plant is dead. Sometimes if you really want to work on it, you can try to keep growing it and see if it'll put out like another baby plant out on the sides. But I can tell with this one, like when I squeeze right here, it's soft, that there's no saving this. So this is a plant I would compost and, you know, get a new one. But that cacti part, right, despite the fact that it's rotted out here, right, the roots still look really, really good on this. And the leaves still looked pretty good on this. I mean, when I looked at this on, I think on Sunday, right, it wasn't yellow yet at the base. And that looks like it's a totally good leaf. Now, if your orchids have not been getting enough water, then these leaves will be kind of floppy. So you can see that mine are standing upright. They're firm, right? So it's getting enough water. I can also tell it's getting enough water because I have nice, plump looking roots. When I watered this previously, let's see if I can pop it out. The roots on this are green and plump. It has dead roots in it, but it has lots of live roots down in here. And the way you can tell in one of these commercial sphagnum moss packs that they're packed really tight is that there's no way for the roots to breathe inside the moss. And so the plant actually, if it's got any roots down in the moss inside this plastic at all, it grows, the roots will grow around the edge of the sphagnum moss. It doesn't actually have roots inside. It doesn't have live roots inside. And in this one, you can tell that this one's actually been suffering pretty much inside. All of these, like this is dead, squashy, crappy roots right here. So this plant's okay. It has all these live roots that were not inside, but it has like, mostly dead roots that are inside. And so you can break up just by getting in there and wiggling and break all this root stuff up. So you can see as I'm pulling it apart, there's no live roots down in here. And you just want to be careful when you do it, not to break that main monopodal stem in the middle. And you can clean it off a little bit. You can use clippers if you like. But usually this stuff is really soft and easy, and I just kind of snap it off with my hands. So like this is dead root. You can leave this kind of root if you want to use it to help stabilize your plant, or you can get rid of it, personal choice. So now I have a plant, it's got all the old moss cleaned off on it. And what kind of pot should I put it in? So I like to grow these at work in a pot. It's easy for me to take care of them when they're in a pot. And I like to water them about every 2 weeks in my workplace. So I like to put them in moss because it lets me water less often. The pot is for you. So I like to pick a pot that lets me stabilize the orchid inside it so it won't fall out. So I almost always pick a pot for repotting that is half the size of the width of the leaves. So like this one. So you can see that when I hold out the leaves to the side, right, they're about twice as wide as the diameter of the pot. And then I very gently just tuck some moss in here to provide ambient humidity and moisture. I'm not doing this, and like to basically keep it in the pot. Now, I had aerial roots that I am now tucking into the pot because I'm using this as a method for tidying it up. The aerial roots, if you pot them in too tight with too much stuff around them, will die. If you pot it very lightly, then the roots will survive-ish. I'm changing their environment from being completely air exposed to being a little bit covered. And so they may not make it, but I'm not going to thoroughly like pack the moss in. So it's very, very lightly, and it's just enough in here so that when the moss is moist, then It can keep everything humid. If I was potting into the bark, I would just gently pour some in, right? And then tamp the side of the pot a little bit so it settles, but I wouldn't smash it in. I'm not, using my thumbs and pushing it in really firmly. So I put it in just enough so that when I move the pot like this, the plant stays upright because this pot is for me. And then you can either take the plant to the sink and water it every 2 weeks. You run the water, avoiding getting water in what we call the crown, the top of the orchid. Or if you do, you can tilt the plant to the side and let it drain out. Or you can, if you have lots of them and you don't want to take every single orchid to the sink, you can get a saucer and you can fill that saucer with like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of water and just let the water soak up to the top. And that'll be plenty for like 2 weeks because moss holds a lot of water and it keeps stuff very humid for a long time. So that is a repotted orchid, which you'll see that I don't have any spikes on this one, and this one had its spikes cut off, right? They'd already been trimmed off. So I did not do it while it was in bloom. The other one that I showed you, I've just kind of left it. I'm gonna cut off the bloom sections, and then I'm leaving it as is. A reason to repot is because the plant has become completely unwieldy for you. So it won't stay up, it's falling over, make it more convenient for yourself. But if you just bought one at the store, you do not need to repot it. And then to get it to rebloom, you need to cool it down. Again, it needs a 10-degree difference between daytime and nighttime for about a month. And here's one that I have in a cup, right? I take it, and this is actually living on my windowsill. And so you can see that I have very gently tucked the roots back in. And this actually rebloomed this year for me. So it opened up, I think, January, like right after Christmas. So it's going to bloom for a while. And that's how you can very easily care for your orchids that you have gotten at the grocery store or Home Depot. Questions?
Yes, great, amazing. Casey, do you want to flip through what has come through in the chat and see if there's a couple that are relevant for the group?
Sure.
And
Sounds
then maybe
great.
we can try some diagnosis if we have a chance. So let's take a couple of questions and then see what we got.
Perfect. So the first question we have comes from Bridget, and she's asking if you need strip lights for the orchids.
So in my grow room, the strip lights here are actually just on right now so that you guys can see the plants. I don't need lights at all in this room because I have gigantic windows. So all that black area up there is windows, it's glass. This is what I call supplemental lighting right here. Because this is shady due to the roof being overhanging this section, I do have grow lights on it. This is actually new. I only started adding lights here last year, and I'm trying to see if by having more lights here, making it brighter, it helps my orchids do better. So I actually don't quite know yet, but I do know that I can grow everything else in here without lights at all.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Susan is asking, Susan says, I have an orchid with buds, but no flower yet. Will it flower soon?
It should. So when your orchid is in bud, the only reason for the buds not to open is if you give it a cold shock. So there's this thing that we call bud blast. So if you take your orchid, like you bought it at the store, you take it out through the cold, then that shock of the cold air can cause the buds to fall off. If you go to Hausermann's and you try to take an orchid in with you, like you buy it from them, they will put it in a bag. They'll wrap it all the way up and to keep the plant warm while you take, the plant with its flowers out to your car. Now, if you have your orchid over by a window or you have a house with forced air and you have a draft blowing on it, that can also cause the buds to fall off. So if your thing is budding, then what you want to do is you want to make sure that's not in a drafty area, and you want to keep watering it the way that you're watering it. It doesn't need that temperature change of 10 degrees from daytime to nighttime anymore because it has buds already. It is going to bloom. You just want to maintain it. You want to keep it, like don't get it cold. Don't freeze it, and keep watering it.
Perfect. And then we had two very similar questions. So if you accidentally take off a good root or if you snap it while you're repotting or just handling the orchid, should you remove it completely? Should you replant it, or what is your advice?
So if you crack a root, I crack roots all the time. I just wrap them in and keep going. There's an interior hard part of the root. I don't have a good one here. Let me find. All right. So here on this, I'm going to set the camera back down. So here on this plant that's sacrificial, right? You can see this root right here, it's been cracked, but this part is still alive. There's a kind of wire that's in the middle of the root, and it's still transporting some level of nutrients. It's not as much as the whole thing. And so if you crack a root like this, you crack it, then just wrap it back in. The plant will be fine. The only thing you need to be concerned about is what they call pathogens. So like if you have cracked a root, and a lot of people like to put some cinnamon on these breaks because that's a bit of a desiccant. It dries out the area a little bit and allows the plant the ability to basically close up the opening. And that prevents stuff like bacteria from getting in. But in general, if you're not like soaking your whole plant in water, right, tucking it back in without doing anything is fine. But people will sometimes, to keep fungus from getting in. So the big thing with orchids, remember, because they're like cacti, they don't want to sit in water. Their roots don't want to sit in water. Their leaves don't want to sit in water. If you let them sit in water and they get cold, then they have a tendency to rot. So they're warm plants. And by cold, I mean like below 70 degrees. So the colder it is, the drier the plant needs to be. The warmer the plant is, the wetter it should be.
Very helpful. Thank you. We also had a couple of questions about fertilizer recommendations. Is there anything that you would recommend?
So I don't recommend fertilizing at all. So what's most important for your orchid is light, temperature, and water. You want to put your plant in a kind of pot and potting medium where it can stay humid, but you're not drowning it in water. You want to give it enough light. Most Phalaenopsis want bright, indirect light. I give mine, if I'm going to give them direct light, it's just 2 or 3 hours of, Eastern light. And you want them to stay warm enough. So these guys want to sit somewhere, 68 to about 75 degrees. So you don't want them to be a lot colder than that. You don't want them to be a lot hotter than that. Extremes of temperature stress them out. If you cannot maintain the temperature, the water, and the light, then it doesn't matter how much fertilizer you give it, your plants are still not going to be doing very well. So I like to think of fertilizer as like steroids, right? If you're not eating a healthy diet, steroids aren't really going to help you. So you want to give orchids the diet that they want. If you're already doing all those things and you want to boost it, you want to give your plant some extra oomph, then any fertilizer is fine. Miracle-Gro, specific orchid type fertilizer. You just don't want to give a lot. Orchids are very sensitive to fertilizer burn. And so if I'm using like Miracle-Gro, I use it at 25% strength. So whatever they recommend for making a gallon, I do a quarter of that. There are some people who want to fertilize every single time they water. You can do that. But I will tell you that if your plant is sick, right, like it's like it hasn't been getting enough water, giving it fertilizer will not get it over that like desiccation hump. If your roots are rotten, right, because you've overwatered and they've rotted out, then giving it fertilizer is not going to help it.
Perfect. Appreciate that. We've also had a couple of questions about when it's okay to repot your orchid. One question was, can it be done while the orchid is in bloom? Another question was if it can be done when the orchid's in spike. And I think you may have since covered that, but if you could just reiterate for everybody's information, that would be awesome.
Okay, sure. So what I will tell you is that repotting your orchid is extremely traumatic to the plant. So just like having that draft that can cause the buds to fall off, it's possible when repotting that you will shock the plant and all the flowers will fall off as well as your buds. So that's why I recommend not repotting until it's done blooming. Now, if you wanted to repot something when it's in bloom, then the best way to do that is to do it without disturbing the plant as much as possible. There's this technique called potting up. So you can basically take out something like this and just put it in another pot and just tuck some fresh media around it, or just shake off some of the loose stuff. So you would just like take this out and you would just shake some of it off. You don't want to like when I was doing this one and I was reaching down in here, or like I was cracking roots, all of that is trauma to the plant. It will recover. Like if this had leaves, cracking a couple roots will not hurt it during the repotting process. But if it was in bloom, you've changed the environment around the roots. So that's a big shock for it. And then now you want it to just keep doing what it's doing. And so it just may not keep blooming. So repot after it's done blooming.
And then Kate, Janice is wondering, where can one find pure New Zealand sphagnum moss?
I get mine online. And so in Naperville, there is a small grower called Nat's Orchids, and he gets like bales of New Zealand sphagnum moss in for his own use. And he will sell it to you. It's like 110th Street. So it's Nat's Orchids. And every year in September, it's the last week in September usually, there's the Chicagoland Orchid Festival. And he will have guest growers, him and Hausermans will have guest growers, and they'll be like open all weekend. And you can go there and shop, and that's usually where I get my moss. I get it from Nat's. at that time. I show up and I go, "You have a bale for me?" And he goes, "Yes." Now I get my sphagnum moss in 5 kilo bales, and it's about $150. So you probably want to get a smaller pack.
Perfect. The insider perspective, appreciate it. And then Sue is asking a question about pests. More specifically, how do you handle mealybugs?
Mealybugs. Okay, so mealybugs. I'll use this freshly potted one. So Phalaenopsis can get mealybugs and they can get scale. If they get scale, it tends to be on the underside of the leaves, and you can tell it has it because when you run your fingers along the leaves, if you can't see it, like your eyes are going like mine are, then it'll be sticky. And with those, what I usually do is I treat with a neonicotinoid systemic insecticide. If you have mealybugs, they have a tendency to put their eggs inside the media down in here. And so if you have a really bad mealybug infestation, the first thing you want to do is unpot the plant, take it to the sink, wash it really, really well. Try to get water into the crevices down in there for both scale and mealybugs. And then after it's been washed, you're going to want to pot it up in fresh media, like not reused, not like this stuff, this old stuff that I have right here, fresh media. And then you're going to want to spray it with an insecticide. I use something called Safari. You could also use I think Bear Rose, I think like Bear Rose Pride or something like that. But Bear sells something with what's called the midacloprid, and that also works. And then if you are trying to keep it under control and you want to be more organic, I use Dr. Bonner's Castile soap, the peppermint stuff, because I like how peppermint smells. And so after I wash this as a control mechanism, I will spray the whole thing with the peppermint soap. I make that up with like 1 capful to 32 ounces in hot water, and I just spray it. But that doesn't really 100% kill the mealybugs, and you have to do that basically every few days. So the way the Castile soap works, it's like horticultural oil, and when it dries, it will film an oily covering on top of the mealybugs and suffocate them. It works with scale too, but only works if you change all the media out, because the mealybugs really get down into the media, and especially their eggs.
Perfect. Appreciate that guidance. And then C wrote in a question about different types of orchids, specifically wondering about Sherry Baby and Vandas or Vandas. Are those meant to be taken care of kind of in the same way as you described today, or is there, different? Yeah.
Okay, so no. All right, so I don't have very many Vandas in my collection. The really, really big Vandas require a lot of, so those are hot growing plants. They want to be about 80 degrees. They want full sun. They also don't like growing with any media around them. So you either have to have them mounted or in a basket. I have just a few Vandas in the subclass Neophonetia. They've been moved to Vanda. So I have this one right here. It's mounted. And these guys want to be warmer, and they need to be watered more often, but then after watering, they have to dry out really fast. So when I had Vandas, I watered them every day. Most Vandas, if you want to grow them here in Chicago, what people do is they take them every day and they soak them for 15 minutes in a bucket. And then they drip dry them and they put them away. So I find Vandas to be a lot of work and I don't want to do it. So I don't grow. For Shari Baby, so I apologize. So up here are some of my Oncidium Alliance orchids. I have other things in there too, but Shari Babies are intermediate growers. They want to be not too bright, not too hot. They take conditions very similar to Phalaenopsis, maybe a slightly bit cooler, but they can take the same temperature range. They generally want more light than Phalaenopsis, and they want to be a lot moister. I pot them the same way that I do my Phalaenopsis, lightly in sphagnum moss, and I like to put them in a saucer of water.
Maybe just like one or two last questions, and then we'll let Kay go. But we're all on the edge of our seats, Kay, so this is just so fascinating. Anything else,
sure.
Casey, you want to pick out one
Yeah.
or more? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just combine two more questions about pot types. We had
Okay.
Sue Boyer asking about tall ceramic pots, and then we also had Diane asking about cash pots. Could you just talk about different types of pots, and are there any that are detrimental or better to use?
Okay, so there's no better choice of pot than any other pot. I'll go over different types. Like if you need a pot where it wants to be pretty, then I like those plastic sleeves. That the Phalaenopsis come in, and then I do put mine in a cash pot. I can show you. I can show you guys. I mean, that's what that cup was, but I have like this right here. This is just a decorative ceramic pot, and I can stick this in there. So I take it out to be watered and I put it back in there so it looks pretty in my house. I grow a lot of my orchids in an inorganic element. I grow them in LECA, light expanded clay aggregate, and all of those are actually living in deli containers. So this is a deli container. I just put some holes in it and they're growing in there. And I do that. It's cheap. It's way cheap to buy deli containers and put them in there, but they're hideously ugly. And so when I want to show them off, I stick them in a cash pot. Plastic pots. I have stuff in plastic pots. Plastic pots dry out faster than clay pots. So if you have like terracotta pots, they work just as well as the plastic pots. What I find with the clay pots is that I have a tendency to knock them over with my butt and then they break and then I have broken clay everywhere. So I tend to prefer plastic over that. But, you know, if I'm going to reuse a pot, I'm going to scrub it out with soap and bleach anyways. And it doesn't matter whether it's clay or plastic. I generally like clay pots for things that are really large. So this Cattleya up there is in a 15-inch terracotta pot, and it's in there because I need the weight to keep it from tipping over. And that's why it's in a clay pot. If I had that in a plastic pot of the similar size, because it's so tall, it would tip over. So I generally use clay to weigh things down. That's why I use cash pots as well. I use plastic because it's just a lot cheaper and it's a little bit easier to clean. But there's really no, it's a personal choice thing. I have very beautiful plastic, back up a little bit, was it 3D printed pots for my Neos that I haven't put them in yet. I'll show you guys one. Right, this is just plastic. And I have, you know, like I have solo cups with orchids in them too. So, you know, it's just personal preference.
Hey, do you want to put your camera back on the mount and then maybe stand in front of your orchids so we can thank you properly? Because
Sure.
at the beginning, you kind of, we could see, we could see you, and I just
Sure.
want to, on behalf of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory and our guests tonight, if we could applaud, like, this was just a wild ride, and I'm so glad that we chose to do this experience where we could actually see you. And so there she is. Thank you so much, Kay.
Well, I hope it was okay for everyone. I was like, you know, I kept having to walk around to make sure that what I wanted you guys to see was in the camera view.
It worked. I mean, we'll get feedback. We're going to send out a little survey to everybody, but I just want to thank you for taking the time. This is a hardworking woman. She is a scientist at, is it Argonne? Are you
Yes,
at
Oregon National Lab.
Yeah. So she took the time and she takes care of all of these thousands of orchids, and she just was so kind to share all of her knowledge with us tonight. So thank you so much, Kay Perry. And
Can I just say one more thing?
yes, please. Yes.
Second week of March, the Illinois Orchid Society will be having our spring show at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Some of my orchids will be there, as well as orchids from other members of the Illinois Orchid Society. We're a society of like almost 100 people. We put on a beautiful, amazing show, and we have vendors from Brazil and Taiwan coming. There'll be lots of stuff to buy, and you can also see the orchid show at the Chicago Botanic Garden at the same time.
Yeah, great. And it looks, their marketing for it looks amazing. So, okay, folks, watch your email. I'll send you a little feedback survey. And Kay, thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm so glad we did this. Okay, guys, have a great night. And
thank you so much.
Thanks
Hey,
for
this was
joining.
beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Bridget. You know, we chose not to do the bring your plant out because we had so many questions. And I think it just made sense to, you know, answer as many questions as we possibly could. But, you know, go talk to Kay at the Orchid Show, and go up north and see what they've got on display there, because I'm sure it's magnificent. I showed Kay a couple of the pictures of the orchids that I found at the Oak Park Conservatory. There were a few interesting ones, some in bloom. And, you know, I didn't think we had a lot of them there. So I did walk through recently to take a look and see. So be sure to swing by your local Oak Park Conservatory and see if you can find them, and knock on my door when you're there. I'd love to say hi. So, okay, everybody, have a great night, and join the friends, buy some plants, buy some orchids, and good luck with repotting and untangling those roots. Okay, have a great night.
Good night.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.